Enemy power-up detected.
This is Incoming Missile, a MechWarrior online podcast. GLHF Mech fans, we are back, and for a change, the Mech Bros are back together for this episode, so it is double the Kiwi accents for you. How's the mech decking going for you, Captain Cat?
We got some big decks coming up for sure in this episode. Or maybe we'll save them for later, I suppose, won't we?
Yeah, 6 big decks, yep, absolutely. Right, so as the title suggests, we are talking faction play today. But before we did get into that, we do have a few other things to cover in the introduction. The Martial Olympiad Reborn has wrapped up, and the comp scene has rolled straight into the Innisphere Coalition. Now that is a 6 versus 6 Innisphere only tournament, and it's hosted by the guys at Aces Wild. Now we are a couple of rounds through at the moment, and the action has been pretty good. So yeah, make sure that you do check that one out. Captain Cat, you are taking part. Any thoughts on the tournament thus far?
Yeah, it's been really interesting, and I mean, doing it straight hot off the heels of the MOR has been an interesting counterpoint as well. You know, going down to the 6v6 and just the Innisphere mechs. Oh, I need a Pop-Tart Hunchback. How am I going to do that? I can't make one. It's quite an interesting little riddle for us drop deck creators to work out. And then the really tight rotation of maps has been an interesting aspect of the rules as well.
I like how it's different, and I think Aces Wild kind of stated really that they did want to do something that hasn't already been done. And as a viewer and a spectator this time around, I've really enjoyed seeing those Innisphere mechs cracking into each other, the old tanky mediums going at each other. Any patterns or anything in particular that you've seen thus far or noticed?
Definitely things coming out of the woodwork that people have very quickly picked up on. Like in the first couple of weeks, we're seeing those Victor 9A1s getting used a lot, and you're really showing the strength of the Innisphere 40 tonners so far, I think, in conjunction with some of those big tanky assaults as well. But I think that one of the most interesting aspects of the ISC is going to be that Swiss system and how that plays out. I mean, we're only week 3, I guess by the time this episode comes out, we're well into week 3. How it streams you into the skill level where best suits your team, I think will be interesting towards the end of the tournament. At the top, we've seen a few stomps and things like that, and a few upsets, which has been great. But as it goes forward, I think the games are just going to get tighter and tighter, and that's really where it's going to hit its straps and show the strengths of that format.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's I think it's from round 3 that we'll probably see the Swiss system come to its own. And we expected that in those first couple of weeks. I think that it was going to be a bit tough for some of the lower seeded teams, but good on Aces Wild. And I also enjoy the idea of winning MC per drop, which I think you covered in the episode that you did with Not Bob and Callan, and I think that's almost awesome as well, because it gives every team something to fight for every drop. So yeah, tournament's been great. Do go and check that out if you haven't already. As with all comp, you head along to Twitch, where most of the action is covered. You can, of course, head to the MWO Comp Discord or the Aces Wild website itself. Now, as at the time of recording, Captain Cat, we also have the Rifleman 2C coming out in a couple of days. And now this is the biggest hat on a mech that I've ever seen. You got any thoughts on the Rifleman?
Well, I mean, speculation is rife on the Rifleman that where is that hat going to sit in terms of hitboxes, if it's all CT or not, will make it very easy to hit from any angle for sure. But in saying that, it's the builds that you can put on this mech are really, really strong. So it potentially is going to need something to hold it back. And PGI have also hit it with some pretty decent quirks as well, considering that it's a clan mech. So it may just need something to stop it becoming an absolute monster.
Yeah, really good point. I know you've mentioned it before, and I know you talked about it with even the Marauder that came out recently as well, and the big gun on top, and exactly what hitbox counts for the gun and where you can hit it from. So, yeah, that's probably the important thing to keep in mind if people are getting upset at the big hat that it's wearing and the fact that you can get it hit from anywhere. That might be something deliberate, given the fact that it has all those other pluses going for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be able to take like 100-ton type builds. So yeah, or at least 90-ton type builds with the 6AC2s and the Gauss lasers and all sorts of other things. But we'll see how much of a monster it is in the coming days, I expect.
Yeah, absolutely, and probably the next time we talk, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about just how OP it is. But yeah, looking forward to that. Again, something different, and yeah, gotta love that big hat.
Needs a bolt on. Needs a top hat bolt on as well.
Or a monocle. I know a lot of people have asked for monocles to go with those top hats for the Urbies. So yeah, let's see that PGI. Let's see some top hat and monocle bolt-ons. All right, so before we do get into the main topic, as always, we would like to give a massive thank you to our fantastic patrons whose support helps bring you the podcast today. So to Live, Dan N, John, Jacob Sawyer, Shaky Snake, BrioS, and Chilgapsan. Thank you so much for your support. Now we did give away a mech pack and some MC to some of these awesome mech warriors this month using the support that they had provided to us. So remember, for as little as $2 a month, you can become a patron of the podcast and again, go into the draw to win a monthly mech pack. So yeah, help keep these Kiwi bros going and throw us some support.
Please, I'm so hungry.
Alright, so in today's episode we are shifting our focus to faction play, and as you probably know, the game mode has I guess been under the spotlight since last year when we had that forum post from Just Call Me Ash, and Just Call Me Ash really kind of started the ball rolling, just asking some questions and getting some suggestions around faction play. Now Paul has been pretty actively involved in light of that, and we had some announcements or some indication at the latest MetCon that they were going to do some stuff, and they highlighted, I guess, maybe a rough roadmap of what we might expect. And yeah, in fact, the change process itself is underway. There's been a couple of PTSs thus far, and I guess Paul and Chris are busily in the back getting some feedback as to what those changes are looking like and what we might finish up with. So, given the focus, we thought we might begin a series on faction play and at least give you a few quick guides to some of the different aspects of that game mode. Now, what we plan to do is not necessarily go into a huge amount of detail, but we do want to cover, I guess, some of the basics. It can be a game mode that is a little bit enigmatic or a little bit mysterious, or people will play it without necessarily understanding, I guess, some of the finer details. Now, in the first episode, we're going to begin with a quick guide to actually playing a faction play game. Now, it's stuff, I guess, that many listeners or many seasoned players are probably really familiar with, but they're things that are worth outlining so that you can get into faction play and understand what you are getting in for. If you are a potato like me and sometimes fail to take notice of some of the things that you're supposed to and basically rely on my co-host to tell me how things are supposed to run and what I'm supposed to do, then hopefully you'll find these episodes useful. If you already are a seasoned pro, you might be able to tell us about those things that we missed. So whether it be knowing about what drop decks to have prepped, the different strengths between IS and clan, what to expect from drop calling in faction play. There are some kind of general things that we will cover today so you know what to expect. Now, do remember, it is the first episode in this series, and we do plan to cover some different things. Of course, the changes that will happen as well, we will cover those things off. So if there is something that we don't cover, we may be covering it in future. But if you think there's anything that was missed or there's anything that you would like us to cover, be sure to pop a comment below in the comments section or flick us a message. You can tweet at us or send us an email. do suggest things that you would like us to cover in these quick guides. So make sure you have picked Advanced Zoom in the skill tree, have equipped at least 2 strikes, and have hit select in the loading screen after you've made the changes to your drop deck, because we're about to launch.
Image enhancement engaged.
Alright, as mentioned in the intro, we are looking at faction play, and in particular some quick guides to understanding the game mode. Right from clicking on that faction play button from the home screen to collecting your millions of C-bills at the end. Now, if you are new to the game, you may not be quite up to play on the ins and outs of the game mode. This is a little bit of a beginner's guide, so we will do, to start with, a very quick run through of the game mode, just to paint a little bit of context. So faction play itself is a separate game mode that's meant to be a little bit more narrative driven, a story-based approach to playing out that conflict between the game's factions, houses and clans, and essentially you compete for the territory and the planets that make up the Battletech universe, and you see that stuff via a large kind of star map as you click and go in. Now, whilst solo and group queue represent kind of one-off battles between random 12 mech groups, and Solaris is this gladiatorial 1v1 or 2v2, faction plays the game mode that involves 2 main types of conflicts. A major battle that's known as invasion, and that involves each pilot bringing a tonnage limited drop deck of 4 mechs. And you also have scouting mode, which is a 4v4 conflict between mechs below a certain tonnage. And in scouting, of course, you're set to achieve objectives that feed into the invasion mode. There are some faction play only maps, which can make it quite a bit different from quick play. And it's fair to say that while you can play faction play solo, really the intention of the game mode is to provide a medium for groups and units to fight against each other. So playing alone can be difficult. The mode does assume that there's going to be a fairly high level of coordination and teamwork. And as Captain Cat says, you can carry as a solo in quick play, but it's really, really hard to carry as a solo in faction play. So ideally, you should be playing the mode as part of a team, and that's really what it tries to encourage. It also requires you to pick a faction, obviously hence the name, meaning that when you do play, you'll either be using either all IS mechs or all clan mechs, and of course you will be representing a certain house or clan in the battles that you are fighting in. It is kind of simple once you've played a little bit, but it can be bloody confusing to start with, especially given the complicated way that you actually have to navigate and click on to get through to playing. So what we're going to do in this episode is cover off, I guess, some of the general principles and the things that you need to do to actually get into a match and play a match, and we're going to tackle that chronologically from before you get in to when you finish. Is that about right, Captain Cat?
Yeah, you got it. And it really can be quite intimidating to get into these things. So, I mean, hopefully we can provide enough of a leg up for those who are interested in giving it a go to get started and try it out. Yeah, that's really my key aim from this one.
So before we talk the mechanics, Captain Cat, did you want to talk a little bit about what the appeal is of playing faction play? Why play faction play instead of group queue or solo queue?
Those of us who've played a number of quick play games so many that I'm not really prepared to admit. I think it's nice to have a new challenge, and faction play really does represent an extra challenge above and beyond what is available in a quick play game. And it has its share of stomps for sure, but there can be some really tight and close games where it really comes down to the final seconds. And obviously, that's what you're looking for in any kind of competitive game, is a close game. Close game is a good game, and faction play does give you the opportunity for the best experience in that regard, in my opinion. As you mentioned, it is explicitly marketed as a team, as intended for teams to play on it. And so, getting in there and almost treating it like a competitive game, getting your mechs sorted. What is everyone going to bring? How are you going to tackle this problem? Is a nice challenge, which is, I guess, a step down from comp, but a step up from quick players, somewhere in the middle. And for us in particular, I mean, the group queue is completely dead in our time zone. So really, faction play represents the last bastion for us to even play together, eh?
And I guess to add to that, it really is marketed, I guess, at units. You play not only as a team, but you get the sense, I guess, more than group queue of one unit versus another unit. So it kind of has that appeal as well. And yeah, as you say, for us, say in Oceanic, we can't really play group queue. It's just not really live. So faction play becomes really the only way that we can get that feeling and play out the mech warrior unit stuff.
Yeah, and there's those units that are really well known and regarded within faction play as well, as being sort of stalwarts of the mode, and they're kind of boogeymans to go up against, because they've got the experience and a tight unit that knows what they're doing.
And there's playing out the teamwork not only in the actual mechanics of the game, but faction play, I guess, as we mentioned, is maybe a little bit more connected to the story of the BattleTech universe than maybe some of the other game modes. So, if you know about the lore and if you know about what the units and the houses and the factions represent, faction play also gives you the chance to almost role play that out a little bit as well.
Oh yeah, that's a really good point. That represents the closest ties to those lore-based aspects of the BattleTech universe that are available in MechWarrior Online, and it's a great tie-in to just mention as well that there is a patch coming out around this time, and without going into too much detail, one of the major changes that they're looking at making is giving faction play a little bit more reason to be, a little bit more story and sort of flavor to tie it back into those sort of lore-based conflicts. And I think that's something that is sorely needed actually for faction play. Is why are we fighting?
Yeah, and it's probably one of the difference makers, really. It's one of those things that draws you to faction play, even if you do like the mech math and that kind of stuff. It is cool to feel as though you are working towards something story based, and particularly for those people that understand the lore and are part of a unit and are loyalists to a unit, and it represents something to them. Those improves to the story mode was identified as something that was a little bit lacking. And it'll be really interesting to see what changes they make to kind of emphasise that part of the game.
While we're talking about patch notes, I would just like to highlight that there is some stuff that we may mention that will immediately be superseded by what's coming. So, because I mean, those patch notes, it's a couple of paragraphs for what is really a decent sized revamp of the mode. So don't exactly know how some of the things are going to work out, like how they're going to exactly work, certain UI aspects of it and all that kind of thing. So hopefully it's still relevant, but there may be some small things here and there that are not anymore.
Yeah, we'll do what we can with what we know. That is probably fair.
Yeah, for sure.
Captain Cat, one of the parts that I quite like about faction play as well, another one of the appeals is it almost takes the mech math to that next level. A lot of us like the mech lab stuff. I know that you're a bit of a savant in the mech lab. That's another cool thing about faction play, of course, is it quadruples the mech math.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, being able to work out how you're going to cram your mechs that you want to bring within your 255 or 265 ton limit, depending on whether you're a clan or IS, is another whole aspect to it. And then, of course, there's certain parameters that are pushed upon you by the game modes and just by it being faction play that create different requirements for designing your mechs. Like if you want to make a mech that lasts the whole battle, well, it's going to have to last through 4 rounds of combat. It's going to either need a hell of a lot of ammo or it's going to need to bring lasers, for example, just as one example. Yeah, being able to get through a whole engagement with one mech is one small challenge you can give yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's almost the inverse to Solaris, so you might want to, adopt a build or adapt your build for Solaris, and the fact you're only going to be taking on one mech, whereas faction play is kind of the other end of the continuum where you may have to battle against 48 mechs, so that's quite different.
Yeah, that's a really good example to talk about Solaris, where you're trying to fine tune your build because you'll only need a limited amount of ammo, while you're on the opposite end here.
All right, Captain Cat. Our listeners are at the home screen. They're really keen to play faction play. Talk to us a little bit about the pre-game before I even get into a game and can start shooting at mechs. What's the pre-game bring us in the faction play world?
All right. So if you click on that faction play button up the top of the screen, you're immediately presented with this star map and then a whole lot of buttons with this patented UI that PGI only PGI can make UIs like this. So there's just buttons everywhere, and then some of the most important info is represented with some of the smallest text. And yeah, let's crack into this and see what we can find. So on the left side, you've got a left side at the top. You've got a bunch of buttons which pertain to the faction play, career selection, inner map, and so on. So in the career selection, you'll be asked if you want to be a loyalist, a mercenary, or a freelancer. Now, basically, at this time, I'm going to recommend you just go right ahead and be a mercenary because there's no huge advantages to being a loyalist at this time, unless, of course, you want to go down that law route and pledge loyalty to a particular faction and cosplay, roleplay, whatever you want to call it.
I love dressing up as a robot.
I don't know if any of them are robots, but yeah, I think you got the general idea. So yeah, so if you pick loyalist, you'll have a 10 game probation, and then you'll start earning extra rewards above and beyond what you'll normally earn at the end of the game. So there is some advantages to that. For example, if you're a purely free-to-play pilot, you don't put any money into the game at all, it's a great way to farm mech base. I think every 3 ranks or whatever that you earn by playing multiple faction play games, you'll get a mech bay, and some tat for your cockpit and things like that related to the faction that you're loyal to. But generally speaking, mercenary is where most people choose to pledge their loyalties these days. You can jump around depending on where the battles are. If you want to switch to IS and clan and those kind of things and not have to do those probation matches over and over again. And then freelancer again. This is probably one of those things that might actually change quite a lot following the patch. But yeah, for now, freelancer is just best to be avoided. Factions, you can learn about the factions in there if you don't know anything about them. Otherwise, I'd recommend you head to sana.net and check out some of the lore around those. Unit. Now, you have to be in a unit to be a mercenary or a loyalist. And that unit, if you don't want to join a unit of real living people, you can just make your own unit. And then the contracts are where you'd go as a mercenary to take a contract to pledge sort of mercenary loyalty to the highest bidder in there. And the rest of the buttons, so the faction reputation, as you play more games as a mercenary, once again, just like if you pledge loyalty to any of those units, you'll earn certain rewards as you reach milestones in XP, sort of running through those. The rest of those, I mean, they're kind of self-explanatory. Explore those if you wish. Leaderboards, you can modify your drop decks in here. You can do it from all over the UI within MechWarrior, but this is one of the places you can do it. You can still do it in the lobby as well if you want to tweak your drop deck once you see all the parameters of the game. And yeah, War History shows you what's happened recently.
And that's that Battlefield territory. But basically you're saying that firstly, of course, you need to select a career, and the career that you select will dictate some of the rewards that you get. And of course, you do have to be part of a unit to be able to participate.
Yeah, that's a basic summary.
Right, now I've done all that, Captain Cat, and I am ready to play now. What are some other things that I might need to know before I click on the Fight Now button?
Right, so there's 2 major aspects to faction play. There is the main faction play battles, and then there's the scout drops. Now, scout drops we're not really going to cover in this, but they're light and medium mechs only, and 4v4. And they contribute towards certain little bonuses that you have in the main faction play battle, surveillance sweeps and things like that, and a little bit of info on what kind of mechs the enemy team's bringing, depending on who's winning those, which faction is winning those scouting drops. But beyond that, just on the top right, right under the Fight Now button, there is it's a couple of tiny little numbers, and they tell you how many people are in the faction play queue right now. And then there is two symbols, an orange one and an aqua colored one. The orange one representing IS and the aqua colored one representing clan. So that is supposed to tell you through some sort of osmosis or something like that, that the left number represents inner sphere queue and the right number represents clan. So that's literally how many people are in those queues. So if it says 10 and 2, that means that there is 10 people searching for in the inner sphere queue and 2 people searching in the clan queue. Yeah, obviously you're trying to make teams of 12.
So that's really important. You want to go in and play, and if those numbers are low, and if you're by yourself or your group is not big enough, then you're going to be waiting around. So that was a relatively recent addition. I think something that players had been asking for quite a while. But even with it added in there, it's not necessarily obvious what it means. So Captain Cat has at least outlined for us what you should expect there. Have a look at that number to see exactly whether you're going to get a game quickly or not.
Yeah, and beyond that, so if those numbers are low and you feel like you might as well not start searching right now, what you can do is look for those call to arms pop-ups that pop up on the bottom right, and those tell you when there is one of those factions is in a lobby waiting for an opponent to form, and that's a really good cue that it might be a good idea to jump in and queue up for the become part of the opponent's team. And then the third way that you can try and get into a game is to look for the faction play stalwarts. So there's certain names out there. You'll learn these as you go along. There's people who are just constantly playing faction play and forming groups to do it. And you can set yourself in the looking for groups queue within the friends list there, and maybe get picked up by someone in there to participate in a faction play game there. Let's call that an advanced technique.
Yeah. And of course, to remember that the game mode is aimed at groups. So whilst you can drop solo, the experience is probably going to be pretty different for you. So yeah, those are a couple of other good tips there that if you are going to play, do be in a group or try and jag a group somewhere to get in there.
Yeah, and I mean, if you want to head over to the MWO Comp Discord and look at the team info channel there, you can scout through the different teams that play in your time zone and maybe jump in with one of them. You don't necessarily have to commit to joining the unit straight away, but you can easily find people to play with who might be keen for some faction play.
Nice. Good shout out there, Captain Cat. Right, so I have done that. I'm queued up. There's enough people to form a group. I click on that Fight Now button, and I need to click on another button then. Is that right?
No, actually. What you need to click on after you click on Fight Now is Fight Now. And that will start you. That will queue you up to be looking for a lobby.
Right.
And so then that number on that tiny little number, you'll be able to see it shaded out in the background while you're searching. Will increase by 1, and that is you. And once that number reaches 12 or thereabouts, maybe a little more, then you should get a lobby.
Right, so as Captain Cat has alluded to in regards to the UI, you will click on Fight Now in that screen that we described. You will then go to a second screen and you can Fight Now, and you can choose either that invasion mode or the scouting mode. They will be kind of in the top left, and you'll see a progress bar, but there will be another Fight Now button to click on, so you'll need to click a second time to actually get in there. Right, so we have hit the lobby. This will be relatively familiar to me because I have played solo queue and group queue. What should I expect from the faction play lobby, Captain Cat?
Right, so there's quite a lot of information that you're presented with here, and it's all pretty important for you to base your next decisions off. And you've either got 10 minutes to work this out or 1 minute, depending on whether the enemy lobby has also formed. So you really got to get a wriggle on if you've only got 1 minute. Now, this is one of the things that actually we don't know. The patch notes don't tell us exactly how this aspect of the game is going to work. I suspect, but I couldn't tell you for sure just yet, that every lobby will be a 1 minute lobby from here on out because of the way that they're changing how the matchmaker works for this updated faction play. All right, so we got to move quickly now, right? We've got 1 minute. So the clock's ticking, right? So the first thing to look at is the map mode. So it's either going to be Siege, which is the large faction play game mode, or it's going to be one of the quick play game modes. Now, I'm going to assume you know those quick play game modes like Conquest, Domination, things like that, and how they work. But there is a few small gotchas in there. One of them is that Conquest is now 1250 tickets, and this game mode will almost certainly be decided on caps, right? So that means that in this drop deck screen, your team is going to need to get organized to have some lights in the first wave, probably about a lance worth of them, to just smash the caps right from the get-go. Because if you get behind, it's really, really hard to catch up. Okay? So that's one game mode thing that's relevant right now. Domination. I have seen a couple of domination matches lost because everybody brought annihilators and nobody got to the circle. And that is a little bit sad. So make sure you've got at least one mech that, it can at least hit 80 kph perhaps. And yeah, beyond that, whether we're looking at whether we're attacking or defending. And this is one of the aspects where faction play really is quite asymmetric, because defense is just, honestly, it's just a hell of a lot easier.
And for attack and defense, that's for the siege mode invasion map.
Yeah, you're right. So if it's one of the quick play modes, then, it's just pretty much like quick play, conquest, domination, blah, 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 apart from those small gotchas that I've mentioned.
Yep, and it's the 1250 tickets for conquest and domination is now 90 seconds rather than a minute.
And we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail when we get into actually running the drop. Yeah, if it's siege, then you'll either be attacking or defending. Generally speaking, the defense, it has a lot easier job of it.
Okay, and why is it easier to defend on these maps, Captain Cat, rather than attack?
The defenders really just have to, this most basic level, they have to sit, and it's the attacker's job to make something happen and get in there and charge the enemy firing lines. So the defenders have quite a static role, and they can kind of just sit and farm the attackers as they come in. And the attackers really have to work very hard to win in this game mode. And, it's kind of a pro and a con to faction play. It's an asymmetric game mode, so it can be quite hard to make it happen as an attacker.
Okay. And because we're in the lobby and we can construct a drop deck, depending on whether we're attack or defense, we need to think about what drop deck we've got, because it may be a little bit harder for us.
Exactly. So if you're defense, you can probably bring something that's a bit slower, that can just pump out a bunch of damage, and it doesn't really matter how long it takes to get there, because all you're going to do is go to the place where you're defending and stay there for the most part. And as the attacker, the opposite is true. You'll need to be moving around. You need to walk miles and miles to get to the gates. And I think if you're looking for a gauge of what to do, just have a look around in that lobby and have a look at what your teammates are bringing, right? Because you'll have a bunch of friends who are on your team. Look for unit tags. Look for people who are playing together. Try to follow their lead. If they're all bringing Madcat Bs, then maybe you should bring a Madcat B.
Right, so I am in the lobby and I am making sure that I can see what mode we're playing and what map is involved, and that's going to give me an idea of what kind of drop deck that I could bring. There is the ability to chat to the people that I am in the lobby with, so if I do need to ask about what mechs to bring, when, or what type of mechs to bring, depending on what the strategy is, I can do that in there as well. And of course, I've had a quick look at what the opponents are bringing and the unit tags to see whether they are coordinated groups or not. Obviously, the pretty important part of this lobby is the drop decks, and that's down there at the bottom, and you'll see the little 4 mechs lined up there, and then there'll be a little pencil icon that I can click on if I want to edit those. So talk to me a little bit about these drop decks, Captain Cat.
So as usual with PGI, the most important aspect of the UI is the smallest. So just look down next to your mechs down on the bottom left side. There's that tiny white pencil. That is where you can modify your drop deck from within the lobby. Okay, so if you click on that, it presents you with your mech lab, a list of all your mechs. Can't change any of the loadouts or anything like that, but you can select them. So that's where you've got, don't forget we're on a timer here, but you've got to go through and select your 4 mechs to make your drop deck of 255, 265 tons there or thereabouts.
And if I can just add here, Captain Cat, we could have prepped some drop decks prior to coming in, but if we have those drop decks prepped, we don't necessarily know what game or mode we're going to be on. So we may have some prepped, but we may find that those prepped ones don't do the job.
Exactly right. So I have a bunch of, I actually have 8 drop decks. Now, it should be said that they are quite expensive to buy. I think they're like 1250 MC or something. Is that right?
Yeah, 1250 or 1200.
They're quite expensive. So it is quite an outlay, but it just saves the hassle of modifying it every time. So I've got 8, I've got ECM, I've got Brawl, I've got Range, I've got Rush, and I've got those 4 drop decks for both factions, IS and Clan, because my unit jumps around. We don't cosplay. We don't dress up. So,
well, some of us do.
Oh, well, I guess I should speak for myself. I don't dress up as a Steiner, so I regularly drop as IS or Clan, depending on where the numbers are needed so that we can get games and things like that. That's the most important thing to us, is being able to get games. So we chop and change all the time. But yeah, so I'm generally speaking, I'm going in and tweaking what is already there. And that's what you should be doing too. You should be prepping your drop decks outside of the lobby and then tweaking them inside the lobby.
This is obviously such an important part that we are going to cover drop decks specifically in a whole episode of its own. But effectively, Captain Cat, I'm looking at some of the factors that are going into this game, and I'm trying to pick the mech combination that's going to allow me to do as well as I can, depending on what the mode and the map is, right?
Yeah, exactly right. So if it's a close range fight, you might want to bring Daka. If it's a long range, you might want to bring ER large lasers and things like that, generally speaking.
And you might have those prepped and ready to go, so you can just select the drop deck, or you might actually need to go in and construct it on the fly. But of course, that does depend on how much time you've got on the timer, and that can certainly rush you, right?
Oh yeah, I've spent a lot of time sweating over those drop decks only to run out of time in the last seconds. And it must be said as well that you really need to click select, which is another little button just down near the pencil. There's a blue button, and that selects the drop deck that you've created. So by default, it uses the drop deck that you had when you came into the lobby, but you can change that, but it won't sort of activate until you click that select button. And also, you need to do it within about 5 seconds of the timer running out to really guarantee that it'll be locked in. I've seen plenty of people who say, I clicked select and I've got the wrong drop deck. Well, yeah, you clicked it too late.
It's so important. I guess it's small and out of the way.
Yeah, you got it. You got it. It's a small blue button. It is bigger than the pencil, though, at least.
And very quickly, of course, you may sit in the lobby for the entire 10 minutes, right? Of course, it's not guaranteed that you will get an opponent, and that is called a
ghost drop, for which you will get some rewards. It's a pretty easy way to make some money, you know. Once you've got your drop deck sorted out and you've picked your first mech, which you also need to do, like your part of the act of choosing a drop deck is selecting the first mech that you'll drop in. Then you can just go make a cup of tea while that timer runs down and come back and look at it now and then. If after 10 minutes you've made a few 100,000 C-bells, well, not too bad a result.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, as mentioned, of course, the mech math and the drop deck construction is probably one of the most important and often discussed aspects of faction play. And yeah, you're going to make that a little bit easier on everyone, Captain Cat, I believe.
Yeah, we're looking to produce, for the next episode in this series, we're looking to produce a sort of a community resource, which is like a repository for some drop decks with a bunch of contributors from people who sort of names in the community who play faction play all the time. And a bunch of people have told me they're going to, but if you want to contribute, if you think you've got something to say, some neat ideas for drop decks for some of those faction play siege maps, just drop me a line through Discord, Captain Cat, and I'll look at getting your contribution included.
Fantastic. We look forward to putting together a bit of a recipe book, and basically everyone out there will be able to do what I do and just ask someone who knows better about what to do for a drop deck, which is really good for someone like me.
Yeah, at least you can get some ideas, eh?
Yeah, absolutely.
You can always season to taste.
So we've been successful. We've got the drop deck that we need. We understand the map, the mode. We understand what's going to come up and what's going to be required objective-wise in the faction play. map that's coming up, I know that I've got 4 mechs, and when I die, I will redrop in a mech of my choice from my drop deck. Talk to me a little bit, Captain Cat, about the drop itself, because faction play can be a lot different, of course, from group queue or solo queue.
All right. So the title for this section I've called PTFO, which hopefully you guys already know means play an objective, right? So as we've alluded to already, you should be aware that the secondary objective does come into play in faction play more often than it does in quick play.
And I guess what you mean by then, Captain Cat, you mentioned before about the 1250 caps for Conquest. In solo queue, we may be able to just go and kill everyone and then cap afterwards. But in something like faction play, because there's going to be 48 mechs that you're playing against, it's much, much harder to do that. So the objectives themselves are super important. Or, of course, if I'm playing siege mode, I have to focus the objectives, right?
Yeah, exactly right. You can't win unless you win by objective in siege mode. At least at some point, you can kill all the enemy mechs and then win by objective. But yeah, so yeah, the conquest is a perfect example. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm pretty confident that I have never seen conquest in faction play won by killing all the enemy mechs. Do you agree?
Yeah, I can't think. I mean, countless times it's come down to caps. I can't remember one time.
So that means that you can pretty definitively say that this mode will be decided on caps, and then that means that your team really needs to, like I mentioned before, have that Lance of Lights who just make it their job to stay on top of the caps, and then you put your tonnage on another cap, and you can't really afford to fall behind in that. It's really, really hard to hold any more than 3 caps, and 3 to 2 caps, that 3 to 2 ratio just really, your progress at coming back on the enemy team is so slow that really I always play, my mindset is never get behind in Conquest.
And of course, there's spawn points when we play faction play, the places that you will come back into when you redrop, and some caps will be closer to the opponent's spawn points, so it'll be much easier for them to control those caps, which is super different from solo queue.
Exactly right. So you can be deep behind enemy lines doing a sneaky, and all of a sudden a dropship comes and drops some opponents right on top of you. And if the dropship doesn't kill you, then they probably will. So yeah, it really is quite hard to get on top of those cap points that are deep within enemy territory and hold them for any decent length of time. So then we've got incursion, and again, this is often decided by which team has damaged the enemy base the most. So having a wolf pack of lights to get in and do some damage to their enemy base so that's on them to try and come back at you is pretty good strategic decision, or at least defending your base really, really hard and making sure nobody slips through the cracks. And in this, you need to be wary of NSRs.
And an NSR is?
Oh yeah, sorry. So the NSR is also known as a no skill rush. Definitely a derogatory term, that one, but so that is when, so for example, possibly the worst version of this is the enemy team brings 12 assassins and just charges straight through all of your team while you're marching to the front. They just run straight past you, deflecting every bullet because they're assassins and they can't be killed, and goes into your base, destroys it. GG, no re. That nobody wants to play after that. That's a rage quit, that one. And the same is true of assault. You've got to be wary of people just charging straight through you and ending the game within the first minute. So, you can play defensively against that, assume that's going to happen. Bring mechs that can take down assassins really quickly and hopefully have some utility outside of that role. You don't want to be locked into something that doesn't happen. But yeah, just be wary of that, the possibility that might happen, and play accordingly. It's the best advice I could give, I guess, there. Skirmish. So the secondary objective on skirmish is most kills, and often skirmish games do go to which team has the most kills at timeout. So as you get towards the end of the game, you need to start watching that kill counter and thinking which team is ahead, and then that team should go defensive and turtle. I mean, I can't definitively say that because there's plenty of situations where that might not be true, but generally speaking, if you're ahead, it's on the enemy team to act, and they can push your firing line if they want, and you get to just pick that great defensive spot and murder them as they come at you. Domination, control of the circle is paramount. I've seen plenty of games lost because the enemy team just fell back against the tidal wave of oncoming attackers and got outside the circle, and the timer ticked down, and it was GG right from the first few minutes of the game because it just got pushed straight out of the circle.
This is one of those few faction play ones that can be won quite early, Captain Cat, because one team just pushes in and pushes another team right off it, and then the time taken to redrop is enough time for them to chew through those 90 seconds to win.
Well, that's the other version of it as well, is that you can just get down to where you've only got 3 or 4 mechs on the front line, and then everybody else is redropping. Those 3 or 4 mechs get pushed, and yeah, that's it, GG really. So you've really got to watch that front line and sort of curate it or look after it so that it can hold back the enemy team while you bring in your reinforcements and never get to the point where you've only got a few mechs trying to hold that circle all by themselves. All right, which leads us on to the main course, and that's Siege. So this is the main faction play battle. You've got the maps custom made, bespoke for the mode. The 5-second review of Siege. You've got these lanes which lead up to gates. You destroy the gate generators to open the gates, make your way past the turrets and the defenders, and destroy the Ogens, the Omega generators, before finally destroying the Omega weapon itself, which is a giant Gauss rifle that can shoot up into space within the time limit of the match. And again, the time limit does factor in fairly regularly into this game mode.
So, one thing to emphasise, I guess, at this point, Captain Cat, you've talked about some of the different game modes that we'll come across in Invasion, but one of the things that separates faction play out from quick play is the importance of the objectives, and you'll talk a little bit about it more with Siege, but even with those other game modes like Conquest, Incursion, even with Assault and Skirmish and Domination, the objectives play a far more important role than they would in quick play. It is so much harder to get away with just trying to kill the mechs and then achieve the objective afterwards. In faction play, you have got to play the fucking objective.
Exactly. And love it or hate it. Some people hate that aspect of it, to be fair. And even in quick play, you see people complaining because it's a conquest or whatever. Personally, I like, the variation. I've played enough games of mechbro where I'm looking for some variation now, and I like having the objectives factoring into the decision making that I'm doing, and having that.
And of course, the need to play objectives will put some other demands or some other differences on faction play. It will mean that teamwork is more important, as we talked about. Coordination is more important. The need to be coordinated to achieve those objectives as well, whether it be holding a front line or not collapsing a front line in Domination, or whether it's focusing gens in Siege. And what it can mean is that when teams are a little bit more equally matched in skill, the objectives become even more important, because that becomes obviously the more likely way that you're going to win, because teams can be defensive. They can play in a way that means that they're not as likely to die. And again, that just puts the emphasis on objectives, because if time runs out, you need to be a certain way on to achieving the objective.
The number one thing that will win you games is communication, talking to people. Hopefully you've got a unit in your drop. Look for those unit tags and ask them if they're going to call for you. Now, there's some good reasons why they should be the ones calling it. Number one, they're probably in a Discord or a TeamSpeak talking to each other anyway, and you just basically want to be included in their communications. And if they're talking to you, well, then you automatically get an inroad into what they're talking about. And number two, they represent the most players on your team, so it kind of just makes sense that they're going to be working together, playing together, and you can sort of tag along, benefit from their cohesion. Focusing targets, going to the same places, covering the same angles and those kind of things is going to win you a game. And generally speaking, a silent team is a dead team in my experience. If nobody's talking, then that's oftentimes a recipe for disaster. And it's really important that if somebody is having a go at drop calling, it's good to respect that they're sticking their neck out and trying to get your team cohesion, and getting salty or blaming them for whether you're winning or losing is probably not going to help. Speaking generally, a team that's working together is going to do better than a team that isn't, even if what they're doing isn't the optimal strategy. So yeah, just do your best to follow the calls to the best of your ability and be a good teammate and keep your team alive. Don't let them die, and you'll win. Maybe.
So, Captain Cat, you have covered some of the game modes there, and we are in the drop, and we understand just how important playing the objective is. What are some of the other key things that we do need to keep in mind?
All right, so let's move on to a few more general things to keep in mind while you're playing the drop. Okay, so the first thing that you're going to find is some bad guys, right? In the simplest possible terms, with each of your team's drop of 12 mechs, you should be aiming to destroy more than 12 of the enemy team. So keep track of those kill counters up the top center of the screen, because that'll let you know roughly where you're at with their first wave. And if you're starting to destroy people into their second wave and your whole team's still on their first wave, well, you're winning. And because if you keep doing that, eventually the enemy team will end up with what I get called permadead, where they run through all 4 of their mechs, and that means that the enemy team's now playing with 11, 10, 9, 8 pilots, and it really snowballs from there with that much less guns on the field.
Because if they've got a permadead, they can only field a maximum of 11 mechs if they've got one permadead. So even though the kill counter might be 30, if they've got 2 players that are permadead, they're only going to have 10 mechs on the field, right?
Yeah, remembering that kill counter goes up to 48, so that means that there's 18 mechs left to drop, but there may only be 11 pilots to field those mechs. So one person might be still in their first mech while the other person's run through all 4 of theirs. So big advantage once you start getting some permadeads. So you're trying to kill more of the enemy mechs than they kill of yours. Sounds easy, right? Well, one of the number one things that you'll want to be doing is watching your front line. So looking around you, pressing Q to get some information on your teammates, where the percentages are at, and that informs your decision on whether to play aggro or play defensive, right? So if everybody around you is at 90, 100%, then you've got heaps of meat on your bones, plenty of room for aggression, and you can go in and take some risks to smash some enemy teams. Whereas if there's only 6 of you there and you're all at 58%, 45%, there's one guy on 100% somehow. What's he been doing? But that's the time to turtle up, go defensive, make the enemy team take the risks, and wait and try and let your team bring some reinforcements in. But generally speaking, you don't want to bring them straight in.
And I mean, that guy was looming in the back. I think that's why he's on 100%. But and I mean, what you're saying is that much more important, Captain Cat, because playing the objective and faction play is what's important. And even though you might be able to kill the mechs in front of you, people will redrop. And if you continue to push forward with a really thin line and low percentages, trying to continue to be aggressive, then fresh mechs drop and boom, they just run through you.
Plus those drop ships are aimbotting, man, I swear. So once you go down, you'll be faced with that drop deck screen again. This is where you get a chance to actually choose which of your 3 remaining mechs you're going to drop in on. And you'll want to do that based on what you've seen just now in the battlefield. If they're bringing a bunch of lerms, you might want to bring a sneaky light to get into their backfield and backstab some of them, disrupt some of their lines so that your brawlers can push in and smash, get inside their minimum range and cut them a new one while you've got them all turned. Or if they've got a bunch of light mechs and they're really causing your assaults trouble, well, then you want to bring something that kills light mechs.
And again, this is where that communication thing comes important, right, Captain Cat? Because you probably want to coordinate that with your team to say, what mech should I bring next? What are we going to do next?
Yeah, exactly right. And not everybody needs to be doing exactly the same thing. There's some benefit to having some fast movers and some assaults on the battlefield. But generally speaking, yeah, exactly right. You want to coordinate what you're doing and making sure that you're playing your role and you're playing based on the need that's on the battlefield right now.
So if I did just die, which I do quite often, and I'm selecting my mech, do I just hit W and go straight back to where I was?
Well, you stumbled into my trap here. No. No, exactly not. You should not do that. Because, again, as you advance back towards the front line, you'll want to be checking those percentages and seeing where your teammates on the front line are at. Because if they're doomed, if they're all in the sort of 50% range, then what you might find is that you arrive at the front line just in time for them all to die, and then the enemy team just sees you next, and you die, and you've just lost that mech for almost no damage, which is obviously not what you want to do. So generally speaking, what you want to do is reform a new secondary line with the reinforcement mechs, and then all move in together, or at least move in and with the majority of your team.
And again, that's taking that teamwork and cohesion aspect to the next level. You can't just hit W and take your mech into where the action's happening like you might in quick play. The reality is you have to move as a group, particularly if you are, say, trying to attack siege, you're trying to take down some gens, you're trying to move through a gate or get somewhere. You have to move and coordinate as a group. So it's something that you'll hear really often when you're playing faction play, is that people will say don't reinforce, and that means don't just take your mech up there, because again, if it's by itself it might get slaughtered.
Exactly right. And what the enemy team will often do after destroying your first wave is push out, what's called pushing out. So they've got all these beat up mechs. If they can catch some people off guard at your reform line, they might be able to damage that second wave of your mechs with their beat up first wave enough that they can put you on the back foot for the next push. These mechs might be mechs that are running out of ammo, they might be running out of arms and legs. There's really nothing to be gained by them just sitting and waiting for your fresh mechs to come and take them. They might be able to catch some people off guard.
And in fact, there's stuff to lose, because if I have a beat up mech and when the engagement happens, if I go down quickly, there's going to be a bit of time before I can come back in another mech to help my team, right? So it's best if I'm fresh when that engagement's going to happen.
Exactly right. And that's a really good reason to push out and spend your mech, as it's called, is to just get that respawn lag out of the way. There's a bit of a countdown after you die. Then you have to come in on the dropship and march your way up to the front line, which could be quite far. So there's a bit of a delay, and that can be, all that time can be, your team could be getting slaughtered. So ideally you want to be coming in fresh altogether.
And when you die is another tactical decision in faction play, which is something tremendously different from the quick play experience. I, as a potato, be an example of a person that doesn't time my death well, so I might hang around too long and not push out, or I might not eject, hoping to squeeze a little bit of more damage out of the mech I'm using, but then I die when the action's happening and don't help my team. So faction play, again, this idea that we've talked about of the objective, the tactical nature of this game mode, when you die is another thing that's important and something that you'll want to keep in mind when you're playing the game mode.
Yeah, and you mentioned ejecting, and that's something you can't do in quick play either. You can hold down K, and then you'll explode up in a ejection seat out of your mech and be able to respawn that way. And you don't want to be trying to look around for an enemy to be the one to destroy you if you've run out of ammo. You can do that. You can make that decision yourself and time it, as Cozened's talking about, to be at an appropriate time to be on that wave.
Right, everyone. So, as Captain Cat has covered, there is a lot to consider when you are dropping in faction play. The drop itself, much more complex than quick play, and the fact that you've got more mechs to play just adds to that complexity. And again, I think that's one of those things that makes faction play different and unique, and why some people love it as the only mode that they'll play. And for some of us, we like to get in and play it because it is so different. So just to summarize those things, remember to play the fucking objective. That is the most important thing about the drop when you are in faction play. Communication, remember to drop call or be kind to the drop callers and to communicate even more than you would in quick play. Remember to keep an eye on the kills and note where there might be permadeads. Remember that the percentages, the front lines, the health of mechs is critically important in faction play so that you can time when you die and when you intervene. And of course, don't reinforce. That's really, really important. So keep those things in mind when you are dropping in the game.
And you'll win.
Yeah, easy.
Just click on their heads. Just click on their heads and you'll win. Yeah. And then when you do win, you get some money.
Yes. So I am victorious, Captain Cat. I've just spent probably 20 to 25 minutes playing faction play. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I've had an amazing game and got like over 2,000 damage.
Wow.
What do I get after that?
You'll get a decent amount of C-bills, kind of 1.5 million C-bills for a performance like that, I'd say. You'll get a bunch of XP. All those mechs that you used, all those 4 mechs that you used will get XP. And unless, of course, that you were one of those farm from the back kind of guys, and with your advanced zoom, not think of anyone in particular, but and then if you were able to get through the whole faction play game with using a single mech, then you'll get over 1,000 match score for a game like that, which is kind of mental, don't you think?
Yeah. It is one of the things to keep in mind is that faction play and match score does tend to reward survivability. So the number of mechs that you haven't used will count towards your match score. So yeah, the rewards are pretty significant, and you'll actually ended up getting rewarded more if you didn't die. So it's a little bit weird. I think it kind of encourages survivability, whereas potentially maybe damage or those other objective-based things should probably be rewarded more. But
exactly. I mean, we've got an objective. We're playing the fucking objective, and yet we're being rewarded for not taking risks. I mean, it seems like a real disconnect there between the kind of gameplay that is being incentivized and the kind of gameplay that actually wins games.
Absolutely. And the last thing you want to encourage is someone to be sitting in the back with advanced zoom, avoiding using their armor, not thinking of anyone. But again, don't get too salty if you see your match score or see your reward, and then the person next to you that did less damage but only used 1 mech has got double the match score and more C-bills. It is kind of one of the unique things about faction play, and hopefully maybe that's one of the things that we might see changed in regards to the PTSs.
Yeah, let's incentivize playing the objective, in my opinion.
Alright guys, that is probably about enough from Captain Cat and myself. As mentioned, that is just a quick guide to faction play. There is a lot there that we didn't cover. We didn't get into some of the detail, but we do plan to do that in the episodes moving forward. Faction play is a unique experience. There is a lot that we can talk about, and again, given that we are likely to see some changes coming up, it's something that we are going to switch the reticle to and hopefully start bringing some information to you. So as always, we hope you enjoyed what we talked about today. We would be very keen to hear from you. There is a ton of stuff that we probably didn't cover that you think's important about faction play, so make sure that you do flick us a message on Discord, you do leave a comment below, or of course flick us an email and tell us about those kind of things.
And if you'd like to contribute to the faction play drop deck thing, do get in touch with me, because I'm interested in hearing what you have to say.
Absolutely. Let's put together a little bit of a resource that everyone can contribute to, and certainly can be helpful for potatoes like me. Have a quick and easy recipe book that I can go to know exactly what drop deck I should take on the siege map that I am playing on. Alright, that's probably about enough from me, guys. I am holding down the K key and I'm about to eject. We'll see you all next time.
Host 7 mechbros.
The main attraction, distraction. Got you the numb. Empty your pockets, son. They got you thinking that what you need is what they selling. Make you think that mine is rebelling.
If you did enjoy this content, then please consider supporting us. You can do this in a multitude of ways, including subscribing to our podcast on your favourite podcast platform and leaving reviews, as well as subscribing to us on YouTube and liking our videos. You can also support us by sending us feedback either through comments, tweets, or directly through email. Tweet and follow us on Twitter at IncomingP, or email us directly at incomingmissilepodcast@gmail.com. You can also support us directly by becoming a patron or sponsor. You can find us on Patreon at Incoming Missile Podcast and choose one of 3 tiers of support. Patrons not only get mentioned on the podcast and get access to exclusive content, but can even join us as a guest host on the podcast. You can also opt to sponsor an episode through one-off donations, all of which will be used as giveaways for our listeners. So if you had a product, service, or content that you'd like us to mention, contact us to discuss sponsoring an episode. We hope you enjoyed this episode. We look forward to hearing from you. We appreciate you listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Disguise. View the world from American eyes. The poor adore, keep feeling for more. The thin line between entertainment and war. Fix the need, develop the taste. Buy the products or get laid to waste. Coca-Cola is back in the veins.
Shutdown sequence initiated.